Racism in Malaysia is a big thing and it has already affected the youth.
Racism can differ depending on the various ethnic groups found in the country.
The brushes with racism, discrimination, and the complexity of identity.
Racism in literature refers to the portrayal of racial discrimination in literary works.
Through social media, I've seen many cases about racism.
Racist comments are not okay.
Racism is still one of the problems that we have to encounter, especially in Malaysia.
Racism is about appearance of each community. Mostly, this is about the color skin.
Racism is
Racism is
Changing racism in Malaysia. Assalamualaikum and a very good day. Generally, Malaysia is a country with multiple ethnicities and cultures. This multicultural country encompasses a seamless fusion of Malay, Chinese, Indian, and diverse indigenous communities. However, the presence of diverse ethnic groups within a society has unfortunately resulted in the emergence of social judgments. Like in any multicultural society, Malaysia is not exempt from racism. Therefore, we decided to focus on racism that occurs in Malaysia, such as stereotypes, slurs, and racial discrimination. Racism can differ depending on the various ethnic groups found in the country. The coexistence of different ethnicities can lead individuals to form preconceived notions, generalizations, or biased beliefs about individuals or entire communities based on their ethnic backgrounds. These judgments and stereotypes can stem from various factors such as cultural misunderstandings, cultural conflicts, or limited exposure to diverse perspectives. They often overlook the individuality and unique experiences of people within these ethnic groups, leading to misunderstandings, discrimination, and social divisions.
We need to dive deeper into this chronic issue. Therefore, we have divided this issue into two parts: racism in the social context and racism in literature. Let's start with racism in the social context. Racism in the social context means racism that happens for Malaysians in their everyday lives. It could be in their daily conversations, in the workplace, or in learning institutes.
To further uncover the truth behind this, we have conducted some interviews from the people around Kuala Terengganu. We aim to see if racism in any kind of form still exists. We asked the interviewees about their take on racism in Malaysia and does it still exist nowadays amongst the Malaysian society. So let's check it out.
I think racism is still one of the problems that we have to encounter, especially in Malaysia, which is a multiracial country. But I do believe it still exists in certain communities, but for me, personally, I don't feel much effect that it has caused to me.
In my observation, racism is about appearance of each community. Mostly, this is about the color skin. And the second one is as we concern that living in Malaysia with the multi-races, supposedly that racism still exists among the races of Malaysia.
So far, I have never experienced racism, but through social media, I've seen many cases about racism. So it should be an end, and we should find solution for it by educating others, since small, and even elderly people. Thank you.
I have an experience. During the class, I was getting late to come to class. And then the one guy, I'm not mentioned either he is Chinese or Indian, then they said that Melayu is bangsa, malas and lambat. And that's the kind of the racism that I ever had in my life.
So, see for yourself. Racial discrimination amongst Malaysians do still exist. It only took us 2 people to ask to get a solid proof of this issue. Think about how many more that experience this in their daily life. When will this stop and how will we fight against this? Before we uncover that in a moment, how about racism in literature? Let's find out if racism in literature is a thing.
Racism in literature refers to the portrayal of racial discrimination in literary works. Racism in literature occurs when authors use books or stories to show and examine unfair treatments, stereotypes, and prejudice based on someone's race. In order to gain a deeper understanding of racism in literature, we have chosen to conduct a book review. The purpose of this book review is to provide valuable information, insights, and perspective on how racial discrimination is portrayed in literary works. Book reviews assess how effectively a book addresses racism, critically analyze the portrayal of racial discrimination, stereotypes, and prejudice within the literary works.
So, Interlock is a book written by a Malaysian author, Abdullah Hussein. This book is about the experiences the Indian community in the early 20th century. So the book digs into the Indian community's hardships and also challenges, such as their brushes with racism, discrimination, and the complexity of identity. So it investigates the disputes and tensions that occur from interactions between Malaysia's many ethnic communities, notably the difference between the Indian population and the dominant Malay community, as the evidence in the book, page 179, coming from their respective homelands, China and India, Ching Huat and Maniam struggle to overcome obstacles before settling down in Malaya.
The second book is Malay Sketches by Frank Swettenham. He offers a glimpse into how race, culture, and identity interacted during colonial times in Malaysia. Swettenham reveals the diverse aspects of Malay culture and uncovers the stereotypes that were present during the time. This book sparks discussion about racism, identity, and lasting effects of colonialism. Swettenham's writing reinforces stereotypes, presenting the Malay as exotic and inferior. His language can be disrespectful, which reminds us of the racism that existed during colonial times.
So, in the KL Noir series, the Malays are frequently portrayed as being lazy and arrogant. A character in KL Noir Yellow is revealed as a famous and racist Malay politician guy who blamed other races for bleeding the country dry. In KL Noir Red, the Chinese protagonist yearns to be as wealthy as the Chinese and deludes himself into believing that there are only rich Chinese and potentially rich Chinese as of 2020. However, the presence of these contents may be used to critique and enhance thought-provoking thinking in readers regarding these sensitive topics.
For sure, there will be lots of consequences if we just ignore the racism stereotypes in Malaysia. Here are the two consequences that we have found. First, stereotypes can lead to cultural identities being oversimplified and misrepresented. When whole communities or ethnic groups are reduced to a single stereotype, the rich diversity and richness of their culture are erased, making cultural comprehension and appreciation difficult. Second, stereotypes restrict people's potential by putting them in narrow, preconceived positions. This can stifle personal development, prevent the discovery of abilities and interests, and foster self-doubt and lack of confidence. One of the easiest yet not so many people do is to call out jokes or statements. Let people know that racist comments are not okay. If you are not comfortable or do not feel safe being confrontational, try to break down their processed thought and ask questions. For example, that joke doesn't make sense to me. Could you explain it? Or you may be kidding, but this is what it means when you say that type of thing. Do not be afraid to engage in conversation with loved ones, co-workers, and friends. Remember that not saying anything or laughing along implies that you agree.
Racism in Malaysia is a big thing and it has already affected the youth. Stereotypes instilled in their minds at such a young age. A suggestion that would make sense to prevent this is fighting racism in learning institutes, as in schools and universities. But how? One of the common ways is introducing syllabus in educational level, but that has already been done by the government before. So what are the other ways to fight this? So first, understanding and respecting diversity. Understanding and respecting cultural differences amongst ourselves is important. Different races have different cultures and ways of living. The way they were raised are different, and it influences how they think and perceive the things in front of them. It is vital that these differences be accepted in schools, as schools should be safe havens for students that are free from racism. Schools and universities should start with initiatives to accustom students to the differences, as an example, the Sekolah Semua campaign by Architects of Diversity, or AOD. AOD is a non-profit organization that aims to bridge communities and identity groups among youth in Malaysia for justice, peace, and a sustainable future. The Sekolah Semua campaign aims to advocate for anti-discrimination policies in schools, colleges, and universities in Malaysia. How did they do it? First, by preparing platforms for the voice of the victims of racial discrimination. Second, conducting research. And third, studying the best practices that should be applied in Malaysian learning institutes. We should have more of this in Malaysia because it acts as a jumpstart to fighting racism in learning institutes.
One solution that can be made to promote cultural awareness in our society is by encouraging reading about the history of the cultural groups in Malaysia. The information obtained can help us understand and amend misconceptions about different cultures and how they have contributed in shaping our community. According to Grasso, multiracial literature can also foster understanding among readers regardless of culture or race. Many fictional and non-fictional books promote Malaysia's history, including A History of Malaysia by Barbara Watson Andaya and Leonard White Andaya, and The Way of Our Sky by Hannah Alkaf.
So, one of the solutions that can be made to promote cultural awareness in our society is by organizing seminars and programs that can emphasize cultural understanding and writing sensitivity, for instance, in the classroom. So these programs can assist prospective authors in developing the skills necessary to discuss diverse cultures in a polite and realistic manner, avoiding stereotypes, and also encouraging cultural understanding. So according to Scavacat 2011, using literature in the classroom and offering students the opportunity to encounter different cultures in curriculum.
Throughout the documentary, we have touched on issues circulating the racism in the multicultural nature of Malaysia. These issues vary among different ethnic groups in Malaysia. They can lead to biased beliefs based on one's ethnic background, which has been proven from the interviews we have conducted with different races in Malaysia. These issues can also be shown through the various books we have reviewed that reinforce stereotyping or any kind of racism in their writing. Furthermore, several threatening impacts of stereotypes on cultural identities and individuals have been highlighted if these issues are not being recognized and handled properly. In the end, we have uncovered solutions or recommendations we can do as responsible and sensible Malaysians to overcome the racism and other societal judgments in our society. To conclude, let's pause for a moment and reflect on our thoughts and behaviors as a way to be mindful of biases and prejudices from happening. And remember, the changes always start with you.